Yep, the post-AUKUS glow fading already. The PM back from his San Diego sojourn and copping it from all sides, not least his own.
The idea that we need American submarines to protect us, 3 are going to protect us from the might of China. Really? I mean, the rubbish of it.
Paul Keating's coming out of nowhere to spoil the PM's homecoming.
It must be the worst deal in all history.
The Labor elder rolling back the years with his press club rant singling out Penny Wong.
Running around the Pacific Islands with a lei around your neck handing out money, which is what Penny does, is not foreign policy.
Along with literally anyone who's ever raised concerns about China.
What makes you so sure China isn't a military threat to Australia?
Because I've got a brain and I can think.
Sportingly, the opposition leader offered some solidarity.
Australians understand that the circumstances in our region have changed dramatically. I think every Australian except Paul Keating gets that.
But the sun seems to be setting on the brief bipartisan blip that was AUKUS.
Labor never ordered a single submarine, not a single ship from an Australian manufacturer when they were in government.
And with the energy market operator warning of imminent gas shortages this winter, Dutton dusted off an old coalition classic.
They just can't manage money. Your power bills will always be higher under Labor. Your gas bills will always be higher under Labor.
Even some state Labor counterparts starting to wonder what the epic subs outlay means for health spending and GST distributions.
If we can afford to spend $400 billion on submarines, we can afford to fix Medicare. We can afford to make sure that states and territories are supported.
So with friends like these, enemies like these, and frenemies like these, what's a PM to do? Let's ask him.
He's the man who puts the I'm in Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Welcome to the show.
Good to be with you.
It's nice to see you again, but I tell you what, $368 billion is a huge amount of money. How are you going to pay for this?
It is a lot of money, but we've been pretty transparent about it. That's over many decades. And if you think of it as this, it's basically 0.15% of GDP or less than 10% of our defence budget. So from my mind, when you think about it, does having nuclear submarines increase our capability, increase our defence by 10% or more? You bet it does.
So can you rule out spending cuts and new taxes to pay for these fancy new subs?
Well, we don't have hypothecated taxes in this country, but we know there are budget pressures. We've been upfront about that. We made a difficult decision about superannuation, but it was targeted. It just affects only 0.5% of the population. And in terms of spending as well, we can't do everything that we would want to do because we do have to prioritise, but the defence of the country is a solemn responsibility that the government holds very dear.
What about the stuff you're already doing? So NDIS has come up in discussions. It's an expensive program. It'll only get more expensive. Stage 3 tax cuts, which you've pledged to support and legislated in opposition, that always comes up. Are those things going to be touched?
Well, look, we will look at, over a period of time, governments are going to have to look at the budget. That's the truth, but all governments have to do that. But we think this is a responsible commitment that we've made. You'll see in the budget in May that we've made space for it. We've also done a defence strategic review that we haven't released yet. And what that does is look at, OK, what are the assets that we need? What are the capabilities to defend this country? And that will mean some reprioritisation of defence as well.
So you're going to find other cuts within defence then to
Well,
fund
what we'll do is find the right priorities going forward to make sure that Australia has the capabilities that we need. And at the same time, we're investing in those relationships. We understand that national security isn't just about your assets. It's about climate change, for example. It's about having good diplomatic relations with our neighbours. That's why on the way back I called into Fiji to see Prime Minister Rambuka, who was very supportive of what we're doing. That's why I spent time in India with Prime Minister Modi. That's why in January I was in Papua New Guinea, the first person to speak to the PNG Parliament. We understand that it's a matter of diplomacy. We want stability and security in the region, and we see this as an investment.
Albo, a lot of people are wondering how we're going to pay for it, right? There's a lot of chat in the media. I wanted to come to your aid. I wanted to help you out. So this morning I jumped on GoFundMe, I've made a little GoFundMe for you. I've just got it here if you want to have a look. Trying to raise.
How's it gone?
300. Well, there's $50 donated.
There's $50. Well, that's a start.
Well, I kicked it in. I want to get the ball rolling. But every little bit helps, right?
Indeed. But well,
is GoFundMe part of your plan? Is what we want to know.
We didn't think that through, but maybe I'll take that to Katie Gallagher as the finance minister and see what she thinks about the GoFundMe strategy.
There's been a lot of discussion over the past few weeks about a possible war with China within 3 years. We had Malcolm Turnbull on the show last week and he was saying it could be less than 3 years. Is this nuclear subs deal a sign that the threat is real?
Well, I don't think it's constructive to talk about war. I think what's constructive is to make sure that we have the best defence capacity possible, to make sure that we put in place an optimum pathway for that defence strategy. And that's what we're doing. But we want peace and security in the region. That's why at the same time as we're investing in defence, we are investing in relationships. I had a very constructive meeting with President Xi last year. We've had our foreign ministers meet, including Penny Wong visiting Beijing in December for the 50th anniversary of relations between our two countries. Our defence ministers have met, our trade ministers will meet soon. We've seen some of the impediments to trade between our two countries be removed. They're our major trading partner. We want friendly relationships. We want to cooperate wherever we can, but we will disagree where we must. We do have different values. We have different political systems, and we take that into account as well.
But you can't spend this much money on weapons of war and say you don't want to talk about war. I mean, I understand the point you're making, that it's part of a broader picture.
It doesn't... The previous government sought to use some messages about domestic politics. We haven't sought to do that at all.
That's a different point.
At all.
That's a different point.
It's the same point, really.
Why though?
What we need to do is to act diplomatically, act respectfully, point out differences which are there, and there are there. We want the trade impediments to be completely removed. We want Australians like Chang Li to receive proper process, and we don't think that she has received that up to that point.
And all those points
we'll stand up for human rights.
Sure.
We'll continue to do that.
But you don't buy weapons of this nature unless you are preparing for the possibility of war. Otherwise, it would be a total waste of...
Bear in mind, are submarines a good idea for Australia? That's your starting point. We're an island continent. It's probably a good idea to have a decent navy if you're an island continent. What are the best submarines? Do you keep spending on conventional subs? The advantage of nuclear subs are they can go faster, they're quieter, they can stay at sea for longer. They're just better. And when you get that assessment from the defence experts, then you have a responsibility to act. Yes, they are more expensive, but in terms of value for money, having the best that is less detectable, that provides you with more security, that provides a greater deterrent, then that is a good investment. We've made that decision. It's a bipartisan position because the previous government got the same advice, of course, off the defence experts that we did.
So one of the criticisms you received is, of course, from Paul Keating, former Labor Prime Minister.
I did notice this.
Yeah, I thought you might have heard of it. But just in case you missed it, here's a little glimpse of it.
What makes you so sure China isn't a military threat to Australia?
Because I've got a brain and I can think. What would be the point? They get the iron ore, the coal, the wheat. What would be the point of China wanting to occupy Sydney and Melbourne?
What's wrong with that analysis?
Well, I don't think anyone has suggested that China or anyone else seeks to occupy Sydney or Melbourne. The truth is, though, that China's posture internationally has changed. They're more forward-leaning. If you look at what's happened in the South China Sea, for example, it's a different circumstance from that which then Prime Minister Paul Keating confronted between 1991 and 1996.
So the threat's greater. That's what you're suggesting.
Well, the international politics has changed. We have strategic competition in the region. It is my responsibility as the Prime Minister today to respond to the needs of today, and that is what I'm doing. Paul Keating is perfectly entitled to his view, but the government is acting on what is needed today.
Keating also says that this is just a bad deal. In fact, Labor's worst decision in history. Did that sting?
Well, he's entitled to his view, and Paul is known for colourful commentary.
I know, but he must have been a hero of yours.
Of course, and he remains so. He was a great treasurer. He was a great prime minister. He was responsible for the reforms that Australia needed at that time. This is the reform and the work that Australia needs right now, and that's my responsibility.
Does it hurt?
Look,
Just at a personal level. Your heroes turned around and said you don't have a brain, basically.
I don't take these things personally. If I did that, then politics would be a pretty hard business. So Paul has my respect. He continues. I have no intention of engaging in a public argument with Paul. I talk to Paul from time to time. I'll continue to do so. I'll always take his calls, as I always have.
Now, Albo, I know you've been on this world tour, but I've got a sneaky theory that you've actually been stalking Peter Dutton. I've been trawling through some vision. I found this morning in Adelaide. Have a look at this. So you can see there's Dutton, and then there's a stranger in the background. Oh. Here we go. Look at... Is that you?
That's a bit dodgy, isn't it?
I think we've got a doppelganger out there.
That is very possible. I feel sorry for him.
Hang on, you didn't answer it. You didn't say no. You didn't say it was
I'm not prepared to confirm or deny.
This is a huge...
Where was it? Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Oh, where they happen to be building the subs.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Is that a Newtown Jets shirt you were wearing?
How many of me are there? Yeah. I've got to say, I feel as though there are more than one of me in the last week, given the extent of what we've had to do.
I also wanted to talk about... I can call you Albo. That's OK,
Of course you can.
How do you go on the international stage? Because I know Rishi Sunak, he was pronouncing it... Let's have a look how he's pronouncing your name.
Joe, Anthony... Right, fantastic. Anthony, great to see you.
Now, I know that's how people in the UK pronounce Anthony, but did you want to correct him?
No. He actually said to me before the press conference, he goes, everyone calls you Albo, and he's the third UK Prime Minister I've met, by the way. He said, everyone calls you Albo. Should I call you Albo? And I said, oh, probably not in the formal setting. It's fine one-on-one, because Joe calls me Albo, so
you just let him get
You're cool
your name
with
wrong.
Anthony, yeah.
No, well, it's not. It's the way that British say
But
Anthony.
Joe Biden didn't know Scott Morrison's name last. Now they mispronounce it. Like, for our $368 billion, do we eventually, as part of the deal, get someone to say a prime minister's name correctly?
Let's not sledge the way that British talk. Come on. They're our friends.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, thank you so much for your time.
See, said the right way. Because you're Australian.
Yeah.